Good afternoon. I'm going to continue with my series on the 2018 World Championship between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana. Caruana here has the white pieces and Carlsen has the black. The first 12 games, the 12 classical games, were all draws. They only played 12 games. It was the old 12-game format for the World Championship then, and so the first match ended in a draw, and they had to settle with a tiebreaker, which was a mini match of up to four rapid play games. And if that was tied, then they would begin with a series of two blitz games. If somebody won the series of two, then they were champion. If the series was drawn, then they played another. I think they would have played up to four series of blitz games, and then they would have played an Armageddon. Now, there are people who say that Caruana, having drawn with Carlsen, deserved to be co-world champion. I don't know. They didn't say the same thing about Sergei Karyakin. So I've looked at on the Norwegian side of my channel. I've looked at the first World Championship match, and the first 17 games were decisive. Somebody won each one of the first 17 games played in the World Championship history. And here we have a World Championship where nobody wins. Does this mean the chess is getting worse? Unfortunately, it means exactly the opposite. The accuracy of both players compared to the best computer move in this game was the highest ever in any World Championship match, and none of the subsequent matches have been as high as this. They both played really, really attacking, aggressive, adventurous chess, but they both played really, really accurately. They both countered each other's ideas absolutely brilliantly, and it was only in the rapid play where there was less time to think out all the plans, to sniff out all the dangers and deal with them, that they managed to separate the two players. Yeah, is the chess public glad that the standard is so high when there are no wins? I certainly thought it was a really entertaining match, 12-game match, despite the lack of wins. The chess was brilliant, and you know they both played their best. It wasn't a boring 0-0 draw, to put it that way. They both really tried their best. Both came up with exciting, adventurous ideas, and I think this in particular rapid game was really good because it illustrated some of the ideas that they'd tried out in the match proper, without either of them being able to succeed, because the other one was so brilliantly able to neutralize. No, without time to think out every single nuance, then there was a decisive game. Anyway, let's see what happened. Caruana begins with e4, best by test, c5 by Carlsen. He goes for the Sicilian. So when you go for the Sicilian as a black player, this is an aggressive attempt. You're not attempting just to neutralize your opponent's e5. You're trying to create your own area of advantage. You're saying, I'll take this. Yeah, you have this square. Fine, I'll have this one. And yeah, that's why it's considered an aggressive open. It's aggressive anyway. And all the games where Carlsen played black were Sicilians. In the beginning, they played Rossalimos, so that knight came to f6, which is what happens. Then f3, which is what happens here, and the knight comes to c6. And in the first games, Caruana played bishop here, the so-called Rossolimon Nishmetdinov attack. And yeah, probably the most effective and approved anti-Sicilian on the market. Let's put it that way. But when that didn't succeed, he started trying other plans, and they played some type of Lasker Pelikan Sveshnikov, or yeah, I think they were all Lasker Pelikan Sveshnikovs after that, or something similar. There's a lot of really similarly named systems. Anyway, the pawn comes to d4, Magnus takes, and Fabi takes back. The Kalashnikov e4 not used. So the knight comes to f6. This is known as the traditional open defense. If the knight takes the knight on c6, then black can recapture with the pawn and have 3 pawns here against one in the center, and can play d5, e4, e5, e4, d4, and d5, and create a central pawn storm, as in the famous MacDonald-Labordine game, where Labordine ends up with passed pawns here, here, and here. So no modern chess top grandmaster is going to take the knight here. You see it in amateur and lower level chess as well. And the knight develops, great, can't argue with development. And this marks out as a Pelikan and Sveshnikov. Not quite sure what makes it a Lasker, but yeah, the knight comes to b5 anyway after it's threatened. He's now threatening to come in here and say check. And if he gets in here and says check, then it will have to be taken, and when the queen takes, the king won't any longer be able to castle. And yeah, just not a good variation for black. So the only way to defend the d6 square is by putting the pawn on it, so that the square is now defended by the bishop and the queen, instead of just being defended by the bishop. So the knight comes to d5, looking to, yeah, play knight to c7 and fork the king and rook. And, yeah, doesn't matter that he's got 2 there, because it's covering it. So he has to take the knight. And this is a theoretical discussion they've had many times. There are some arguments for playing the queen, but it doesn't really succeed. If you take the queen, then the knight can be chased away, and then the knight can come to e7 and chase the queen. But when you take with a pawn, this kind of limits the scope of this light squared bishop, and can be considered a small success for black. Not a winning position or anything like that, just a small positional success. And it will be about defending and attacking this backwards pawn for quite some time. And the knight comes to e5, e7 even, attacking the d5 pawn. He might at some point in time be threatening to play pawn here, chase the knight away, and then queen here and attack the pawn for a second time. And so he supports the pawn and makes it so that if he does retreat the knight to c3 after it gets chased away, then he isn't cutting off the advance of his c pawn. So fine move. Knight comes to g6. Black gets, in compensation for this backwards pawn, isolated backwards pawn, he gets some freer play on the king side. f5 is immediately playable, so on. So the queen comes to a4, great. Now he's threatening to play knight here, double check, and win this rook. So he can't, that's not acceptable to black. So white plays the bishop to d7, threaten the knight. The queen doubles up on the pawn. So queen and knight are now attacking the d6 pawn, which is only defended by the bishop. So the queen comes to b8. This is something we've seen in the main match. I think this at the time was a fairly new idea, which you will see many times now. So it's not just that it was extremely high quality chess. It was there was some innovative ideas in the opening here as well. So the pawn comes to a4, h4. Obviously, if he gets to play to h5, then the knight's going to be forced to here. He can't come here because it would be blocking the defense of this pawn, and then if the knight comes to here, it can then be chased away by pawn here, and doesn't really have anywhere to go where it can't be taken. So he has to put a stop to that, and he does that by playing h5, which now makes it possibly a little bit more difficult and dangerous for him to castle kingside. But it's also difficult and dangerous for white to castle kingside because he's opened up the curtains, to put it that way, by moving the h-pawn. So the bishop comes to e3. Yeah, good development. And the pawn comes to a6. Obviously, I'd like to be able to play bishop here, threaten the queen, but it won't work because he takes with the rook, the knight takes, and then he ends up getting 2 pieces for his rook. Not a good deal. So this weakness which he creates here, and the weakness which he creates on this line, are very real, but they're not exploitable by white at the moment. And the knight comes back to c3. Pawn goes to a5. Yeah, smart. Obviously, if the queen comes here, then the rook will come here and chase the queen away further. So the queen retreats, and the pawn comes to a4. If he takes with the knight, then the knight's taken with the bishop. So he retreats the queen to d1. Good idea. And the bishop comes to c7, so that black is now ready to castle kingside. The pawn comes to g3 because when he played bishop to e7, he didn't just get ready to castle kingside. He created a double attack on the h4 pawn, so he has to defend it. So the queen comes to c8, so that if the bishop develops here, for example, there is the possibility of playing bishop here to stop white from castling kingside at any point in time. And the bishop does come here, but he plays bishop to g4, and he's perfectly willing to swap off both the pair of bishops and the queen here, because this pawn in that circumstance would be difficult to defend. So bishop takes bishop, queen takes bishop, queen takes queen, queen takes pawn, and then he's threatening to come to here and attack this pawn, or rather threatens to come with the other rook to here so that this rook keeps up the pressure on the a file. So he doesn't go for that. He defends the pawn in advance with rook to c1, so that if he takes, when the knight takes, the rook is already defending the pawn on c4. But he takes with the queen. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. And the queen develops to f5 to come out to the game. Yeah, can't argue with that. The pawn comes to c5 and black castles. He's fine. He'll gladly get rid of that backwards pawn and replace it with this bishop, which is a great blockader of the d5 pawn. So he advances. The pawn is taken and the pawn is taken. So now he has a passed pawn on the 6th rank. Is this dangerous? Unfortunately for Carlsen has it under control all the way. But the queen comes to c4, doubling up on this pawn and taking control of this important diagonal and supporting the further advance of the passed pawn on the sixth rank. A great move by Caruana. And Carlsen plays bishop to d8. As seen in the very first World Championship match from Wilhelm Steinitz. I remember in my Norwegian analysis of the first World Championship match, I was really impressed by this bishop to d8 move. What a fantastic square. Covering the next move of the pawn and also opening up the possibility of playing here and pinning the knight and still covering these pawns on this side. Great move by Carlsen. And the knight jumps into d5. So he's obviously threatening to play knight here, forking the rooks. Then it would have to be taken, and then the bishop would come here and support this pawn. e4 by Carlsen. Yeah, it's great. You know, he opens up this line for the bishop. He opens up, more importantly, this square for the knight, so that he's now threatening to play knight here, and then knight here check, or knight here check. So, yeah, good. And the pawn comes to c7. Carlsen doesn't hesitate in taking it. So he's piece down. Is he going to get away with this? Yes, he's going to get away with it. So the knight comes to e5, threatening the queen, and also threatening this fork here. And these are the two pieces which support the advanced knight. So he's also undermining the knight, and the knight is at the moment pinned to the queen. So, wait, I said the knight was pinned to the queen. Yeah, because if he takes, then the knight comes here, check, and that's a fork on the queen and rook. And yeah, before taking the queen, you can take the rook, and then if the rook is taken, then he takes the queen. If the rook isn't taken, he ends up getting two rooks for his queen. So, great. But Carlsen calmly plays king to h7. And now the queen is threatened by the rook. If he goes just for swap off for the two rooks, it doesn't work because the queen is covering. So queen takes, rook takes, rook takes, queen takes, rook, and he's got a queen for rook. So that doesn't work. So what about this knight to d7 ideas, which we discussed before? Yeah, well, in this instance, Carlsen plays rook takes queen, and if the queen is taken, then he plays rook takes rook, and yeah, it's or rather, he plays. If the knight is played here, the queen is taken, and then if he takes the queen, he plays knight here, check first, and then picks up the rook on c1. So yeah, so that won't work. If the queen comes here, then oh, wait a minute. Yeah, if the queen comes here, then the knight comes here, check, and forks the rook and king, and exposes the queen here as well. Obviously, if the queen can't come anywhere on this line because it's still covered by the bishop, and he can't come here because knight here would fork everything. So he can't stop all of Carlsen's threats, and he resigns. And Carlsen leads now 2-0 in the rapid tiebreak. He just needs to win the next tiebreak game to retain his world championship. So we'll look forward to seeing what happens in the next game tomorrow. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment to my videos. Yeah, thanks. Bye.